Okay, here we are in Maya. This is a massively complex program, but don't let it overwhelm you. We're going to show you some things. We can't possibly go over everything, but I'll show you the most common things that you need to know to get around Maya. And as we go, we'll learn more about new menus and new sets. Make sure you're in modeling right here. We're going to be using modeling at first. Notice there's rigging, animation, FX rendering, a whole bunch of stuff. We're going to stay in modeling for a while. This is the user interface. This is the main window in which you interact with your 3D objects. I'm going to throw one in real quick just so we can kind of move around here. So we have one viewport here, and the Maya interaction model involves holding down the Alt key, and then if I click the left mouse button, I can rotate around in here. And if I click the middle mouse button, I can pan around. And if I click the right mouse button, I can zoom. Okay? You're going to want to practice that and get good at it because it's used in a lot of different programs to navigate around a 3D environment. Okay? So once again, hold down the Alt key, left mouse click, and you can rotate around an object or a scene. Middle mouse button and you can pan, and right mouse button and you can zoom. Okay, cool. So this is one viewport. Oftentimes when using 3D, we need to have multiple viewports for multiple angles. Hit the space bar, and there we go. We have these different viewpoints here. And it'll say top Y, perspective, front Z, and side X. We're going to explain what X, Y, and Z mean if you don't already understand that in the next video. So I'm going to hit the space bar again while hovering over this perspective window. Notice if I hover over top Z, that's the one that will maximize. But I want to go back to this perspective window. Okay, so I created something called a primitive here. And a primitive just means it's like a basic shape, like a circle, or a square, cube, or a cylinder, or a cone. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and delete this object. There are a lot of other primitives. We will be using polymodeling. There are many forms of modeling, including sculpting and curves, which we may get into later on. But for now, we're going to concentrate on polymodeling. Now, why polymodeling, and what is a poly? Poly simply means many. And what that means is a polygon is made up of many different polygons. Those are the sides of a polygon. And no matter what software you use at the end of the day, even if it's a game engine, it's going to break a 3D object down into polygons. And that's why it's the best way to learn how to model. Not starting with sculpting, not starting with surfaces or NURBS, many other things you may have heard out there, which are great for their different purposes. The very basics of 3D modeling is going to be polymodeling. And you'll learn more about it and you'll learn to love it too. So a couple more things about the user interface here. We've got these buttons over here. Let's go ahead and go through some of these. So this is my select tool. This is my lasso tool. This is my paint selection tool. We'll get more into these, especially when we get into component modes later on. But let's talk about these three tools here. We've got move, rotate, and scale. So if I hit move here, we can grab different axes, X, Y, Z, and we can move our object around in the various axes in 3D space. Okay? So Y is up, Z is back, and X is side to side. And then we have rotate, so we could do the same thing here. We can rotate our object around. And then we have scale, which will allow us to scale if we click in the middle, or we can scale on various axes and create different shapes like a plane. Perfect. Now these are different views that we can use. Remember how we pressed the space bar a second ago to get multi-view? We can hit this button to do the same, or this button to go back to the one main enlarged view. And then this right here will create a side-by-side. And this right here is called the outliner. Now the outliner contains all of the objects within our scene, including things like cameras and lights. They're all going to be here in the outliner, so it's important that you know where the outliner is. Okay? So let's go back to just our one view here. Go ahead and play around with putting some primitives in here, moving them around, rotating them, and then changing your perspective using the Alt and the hotkeys, left, middle, and right mouse buttons to zoom in. Practice navigating around. because you want to use hotkeys, otherwise it's going to be very tedious and slow interacting in Maya. Practice messing with all of these buttons, kind of figure out what they do. Try some of these different polygon primitives, and I'll see you in the next lesson where we're going to talk about components. What are the components that make a poly object? I'll see you in the next episode.